Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel and my studio. For those of you who are here for the first time, my name is Melissa Reed and I'm an artist from southwestern Pennsylvania. So I'm doing something entirely different today. As you can see here, I've got my watercolor set out and I have a piece of watercolor paper that I am securing down to my board there with a little bit of the painter's tape. Now, I know you're going to ask me which colors I'm using here, and while I can put a link to this exact watercolor set in my description for you because I did order it off of Amazon probably about 10 years ago now, unfortunately, all of the packaging is written in Japanese, which I do not speak or understand, so we're going to just take our best guess, and I will describe the colors by telling you what they are most like. So I went ahead, first of all, and put some water down to cover the entire page there, and then I'm going in with a little bit of a black, just the regular black watercolor, and like a pear green color, and that is a burnt sienna type color there, and those are the only three colors that I'm doing to make this background. So my plan for this is to start out by doing a technique that I have seen done several times to make some flowers on here. But first I needed to get a background down because for this technique I need to have paint down on the surface to then remove some of the paint to create the flowers. And I'll show you what I mean here in just a few minutes. So I did actually put a little bit of turquoise paint in there too, I can see now as I'm going in. And all I'm doing is going in and getting some colors laid down and then just removing some of the puddles of water to let it dry a little more quickly. Now I do end up pulling out the hairdryer here to speed it along because I wanted to just kind of get moving with it and keep going. I could have just as easily let this dry overnight, but I wanted to work on it right away. So for those of you that are familiar with watercolors, this will not be anything new, but if you do try this and have never used them before, be prepared. The paper will buckle a little bit even though you do have it down, but once it dries, if you leave the tape on it until it completely dries, whether you let it air dry or use the hair dryer to get it dry, it's going to flatten out as soon as it gets dried. I'm just looking for a very neutral background here. I'm not going for typical floral colors. I'm actually planning on doing the flowers in black, but then they're going to be partially erased so that you could only see the outline of them. I'm going to actually edit out the rest of this drying here and get you to the next step. Be right back with you. Okay, so now everything is dry and I'm going in with some black watercolor like I had mentioned before. So what I did was spray down that individual black paint pretty well to get it good and wet. I'm using the technique here where you start with 5 little dots of color and then wet your brush and spread that color out within the petal shape that you are making. So just watch me do a few here, as I don't think I explained that very well. But I've got my 5 dots of color, and then I'm just wetting the brush, making some very, very rudimentary petal shapes with my brush. And after I let that sit for a moment, I am drying the brush off completely and going in and pulling up that puddle of black paint so that it just leaves the outline, the very faint black outline of the flower. I really love this technique. I think it is a great way to do some watercolor flowers. I am not really, as you know, if you've been with me before, I'm not really a realistic kind of artist. I'm much more of an abstract painter, but I do like to do some florals every once in a while that are a little more traditional in this style, and I just absolutely love the way this creates kind of an ethereal look. They're very transparent. You can layer these, do any color you want. I just really, really like the way these look. Let me know what you think in the comments or if you've done this technique before. It's definitely nothing new. I've seen it many, many times. But I really wanted to use this for this piece because, like I said, I was going for non-traditional. Black is a pretty non-traditional flower color for the most part. And I'm going to be doing some mixed media on top of these once I get them done. At this point, I don't really know what the finished piece is going to look like. I actually really have no idea. Honestly, once I got all of these flowers on here, I loved the way it looked so much that part of me didn't even want to do anything else with it. I thought it would be really cool to just keep it the way that it is and frame it. And it would have been perfectly fine to do that. And I may still do another one like that and do a little set and display them all together. But I did end up ultimately deciding to do some collage on top of this. And I'll tell you, I'm really pleased with the way it turned out. So stick around and I'll show you exactly what I did. So as I'm moving through these, you can see that the flowers that I did initially in the very background were very light and extremely transparent. But as I'm moving forward, I'm making them a little darker. And that is just because of the setup that I have, the composition that I have of the flowers themselves. They seem to be cascading forward, and I'm making each grouping of them as they come forward a little bit larger to reinforce that idea of foreground and background there. And when you look at the finished floral part here that's coming up in just a moment, you can see that these three big ones right in the front, the two that I'm working on right now and the next one that I'm about to put down, are much darker and carry a lot more visual weight. I like to have the visual weight of my pieces in usually the bottom left-hand corner, but this time it's going to be in the bottom right-hand corner. But the flowers sort of move and create like the visual idea of swirling forward. And I really liked the way that looked, so I wanted to push that using a little bit more value in each of the subsequent layers. And once I got this last flower done, I was really torn, like I said before, because I just really liked the way that it looked as a whole there. And once I get this one finished with the painting process and I get the tape taken off, you're going to see that it's actually pretty cool looking the way it is. And I think it would make a neat card or even just a small framed painting in and of itself. But ultimately I do decide to move forward with it. So here I'm taking off the tape, and if you've ever used tape on a watercolor or if you've never used tape on a watercolor, either way, a little trick for not getting the paper to stick is if you hit it with the hairdryer, it'll heat up that adhesive and loosen it, and you shouldn't have any tearing. If you do have tearing, however, I've found that you can use a little bit of the matte gel medium and just lay the torn piece back down and you can hardly even notice. Okay, so I have some stencils out here, and I'm doing a little bit of a negative painting idea with this. And so what I have here is a magic eraser that I have wetted, and I'm putting the stencil over top of what I already have painted, and you can see there the light design that's being put into the background. I didn't want anything too heavy. I did want a little bit of something back there, and I didn't know exactly what it was, so I thought that was absolutely perfect. And that shape is going to come back into play here in the next couple of minutes with a layer that I'm going to be doing here in the future. Okay, so I decided to go in with some mixed media at this point, and I am picking random text blocks out of some magazine pages, and I'm just gel printing them down. So I covered my plate with some black paint, laid down the magazine text blocks, picked up the excess, and now I'm just using the matte medium to pull up that image of the text onto a sheet of regular old tissue paper. This is not the wet strength, this is just some regular that I had laying around, and I'm going to ultimately use that to collage down on top of this piece. So right now I'm just tearing some strips actually cutting some strips and then tearing to see what kind of placement I might want. And I'm not sure yet, so I'm just going to play around with some placement. That's the wonderful thing about collage, is you can test things out before you actually lay anything down to glue. So it gives you a lot of different ways to see what you might have before you actually make the commitment to gluing the piece down. I will be using some gloss gel medium for the adhesive for this part. Now, I typically use the matte gel medium. If you've watched any of my other videos, I almost exclusively use that because I don't always want that glossy finish. But I thought that that might actually look kind of interesting with the watercolor because it's not really what you expect to see. And also, the matte gel medium will cause the tissue paper to really disappear into the background very nicely, but the gloss gel actually does it just a little bit better. And I wanted to make sure that I could still see those flowers as well as that texture that I guess erased is a good word, with the stencils that I used. I wanted to make sure that you could still really see all of that through anything that I collage on top. So that's why I chose to use the gloss in this one instance when I typically don't. So these pieces that I'm using now, the black and white pieces, are actually just some acrylic ink that I applied to tissue paper in big circular motions, and I really like the way that looks. I found an old sheet of that, and then I actually made some new ones with some new acrylic ink that I bought, and I think it adds something because the shape of the drawing on there is circular. We've got this circular nature of the flowers. We've got the black ink and the black paint, and it just worked together nicely. Now I wanted to use a little bit more of that shape that I got from the stencil. So I just took a little bit of tissue paper and my little spouncer there you can see on the left-hand side and made some just collage paper with that shape stenciled onto it to add to the piece. So with the addition of this piece of collage, I'm now really starting to think about composition here, and I like that it has that pattern that I pulled from the stencil, and you can still kind of see some of that underneath from where I put it on there, but I also like the visual weight that it adds to the left-hand side. I like the way the black and white papers are around the edge there, but it's making me realize that I need something up along the top. And I decide to pull an old trick out of my bag, and if you've seen some of my other videos, you will know exactly what I'm talking about here. I'm going to do a little bit of my ransom note style printing. So I went ahead and printed up these letters there, and if you're interested in seeing the process, I will put a link at the end here to one of the videos in which I show you how to do that. But I went ahead and printed up the phrase "tear it down," and that is what I am adding on there now, and I'm just adding a little bit more of the matte gel medium to glue that down with. And once these letters are all on there and dried, I'm going to go in with a pen and just kind of darken up around some of the edges, because while you can see it there up close as I'm working on it, when you're standing away from it a little bit, it's not exactly apparent what it says, and the letters don't have as much visual impact as I would like them to have right away. It's mostly the impact of the red, which of course it is, because that's a very impactful color and it's going to draw your eye right away. But I want the letters to carry equal weight to just give it a little more balance. So once I get these all smoothed down and let this dry, I'm going in with my micron and just giving them not an absolute outline. I don't want it to be very hard edges. I just want to darken them a little bit. So I'm going in with a very loose hand and not quite stippling, but not coloring it in as if I would, if I wanted a solid black. So I'm just going through here and making them a little bit more bold and readable, just so that they have that impact to them. So while I'm working on these, I'm starting to think about how I might want to display these. And because it is a work on paper, I would like to have it framed, but because this is a scrap of watercolor paper that I had just kind of sitting around, it's not going to be a standard size. Now, if I wanted to go get this framed, I could certainly do that. They will do custom framing on any size that you want. But just for display purposes for right now and for showing you at the end of the video, what I ended up deciding to do was to kind of make a faux mat. I have a piece of black cardstock, and I just measured to cut out the inside of the space, and I am about to show you that right here. So here's the finished piece, and I'm really pleased with it. I really like the pop of color that draws your eye in. I like the way you can see the lettering, and I think overall it is just a successful piece. I loved being able to use that watercolor technique that I've been wanting to try, and I think it was a success. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and click the like button if you like what you see here, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel so that you will get to see more of my videos coming up in the future, and I will look forward to sharing more art with you next week. You all take care. Have a great week.